Welcome to today's episode of Expert Showcase. Today we have another epic guest for you. His name is Paul Casey. And today he's going to be talking to teaching you, showing you all about surefire ways to get your priorities done every day. Hey Paul, how you doing today?
Hey, I'm growing forward, Chris.
Epic, epic. Yes, you are. And that's even the name of your company, Growing Forward. And if we all would just grow forward every day, we'd be a success. That ends your show for today. No, I'm just kidding, folks. Just kidding. If it were only as simple as that, then you wouldn't need folks like Paul and I to help you grow forward. So today, Paul, as we do on each episode of Expert Showcase, we're going to start off by going through your hero's journey. For those of you tuning in for the first time, which we know we always have a lot of new viewers, so we love to explain this. The hero's journey in our terms is the beginning, the turning point, and the aftermath. In other words, in the beginning, there was something going on before our guest was this epic success they are today. And then at some point, they hit the turning point that sent them off like a hockey stick moment or a launch pad, going through that dark time to end up in the aftermath, which is the glow of success that they are today. So Paul, start us off by giving us a quick overview of your hero's journey.
Yeah, well, I grew up as an only child, which is like being a firstborn on steroids, they say. And I was under a very productive mother, and she made me join everything and be an expert at everything. I had to get an A+ on everything. And so I didn't waste a lot of time in my childhood and youth like a lot of kids do, playing video games and such. I was pretty enterprising. I became a teacher like they were, and then I became a vice principal, then a principal. Then I moved over to the church side, became a family pastor, then an executive pastor, and then I realized I had some gifts, some natural talents and gifts of teaching, administration, and leadership. And I took the StrengthsFinder test, and focus was one of my top 5 strengths. And that was about age 30. And then just sort of rolling along with life, and about age 36, 37, I went through a divorce, and that sort of rocked my world. That was my turning point. And after that moment, it was like, I have some skills. I need to connect to my authentic self. I need to get this message out to the world and help people be more productive, live their authentic self. And I became a coach and a speaker.
Epic. Well, that is, and it's so interesting because you, like a lot of successful people, achieved a level of success and were going along a particular life path, and it appeared that that life path was taking you, took you from public sector into, the religious sector, and then you had a family, a family issue come up. I know, being an only child and also going through a divorce, I can identify with, a lot of things, as I'm sure a lot of our audience can as well. And it's so great that you took that divorce and you took what was going on and turned it into something positive for everybody else. So I can't wait to dig in. Before we dig into his hero's journey, we want you to stay tuned to the very end of the episode. We've got a special offer for you from Paul, but you have to watch the entire episode to see it. Okay, good. So if you haven't got a drink yet, you don't want to step away. I was going to offer, stay put. You get a drink in a little while. Anyway, let's dig right in, Paul. Let's dig into the beginning. And it's interesting. You said you started off as a teacher, and almost sounded like, did I hear something wrong there where you said like they were? Did you have somebody in your family that was a teacher, or was it a dream that you always wanted to be a teacher?
Yeah, both of my parents were teachers. My dad's was a physical education teacher for like 39 years, and my mom was a teacher as well.
Interesting. So your dad would have hated me. I was the fat kid in school, and I was the fat kid who couldn't climb up the rope, who was always screamed at from not being able to do stuff, in school. So I gotta ask you about your dad. Was your dad one of the nice phys ed teachers that just kind of helped the kids along, or was he a typical teacher that just thought all us fat kids were lazy?
He's the best, the nicest PE teacher you'd ever have. I mean, he never even dressed like a coach. He just dressed like a typical guy, and he ran little tournaments and gave you the sort of the basics of all the sports. Cool thing about him, just interesting fun fact, is he was an Olympian volleyball player before there was Olympics for men. So he got as high as you could go in volleyball for men back in his day.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, the interesting thing you brought up, I mean, since we talked about the type of PE teachers, did was it the fact that your parents were teachers, or was it the type of teachers and what they did as a teacher that really attracted you to become a teacher?
That's a great question. I seem to identify with the teachers that I had. Probably some people would have said I was teacher's pet, and they probably hated me for that. But I just sort of could feel, like, empathize with them, what they were going through when the class was being disobedient, and I sort of felt for them, like I was pulling for them. I wasn't pulling for, like, the students who were goofing around. I was like, and then my parents would come with the stories from school. A lot of those were negative because they were venting, and I never got turned off by that. I was just like, I knew all the dirt about being a teacher, and I still really wanted to be one because I had something inside of me that wanted to communicate truth to others.
Oh, that's epic. And I think that's our first big golden nugget takeaway from today is the fact that you were self-aware as a kid and you were going through and you were hearing about the negativity, and negativity didn't push you off. So for our valued viewers out there, if you're going through, if you look back on your life and you realize that negativity in something didn't make you run away, maybe it didn't make you run towards, but didn't make you run away, that's one key tip that you might might have found something that you were meant to do at least during a part of your life. So that's, I congratulate you on you being that self-aware, especially as a kid, because most kids are not that self-aware, especially nowadays, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I knew when I was a junior in high school that I was called to be a teacher in some way, shape, or form. And that was so comforting to go into college. Most kids nowadays, they don't know what they're going to major in, but I knew exactly what I was doing at that point in my life.
And I love how you say at that point in your life, because many of us go through where we think we know what we're going to do for the rest of our life. And we're absolutely sure this is what we're going to do for the rest of our life, until you get 30 or 40 years down the road and you realize that you're only meant to do something for a piece of your life. And I commend you on that realization and the fact that I'm going to guess that realization helps you now to realize that, okay, you've moved on and you're no longer a teacher, but you're doing it in you're spreading the truth in a different way. I mean, does it
Yeah.
help you does that help you that you realize, okay, this was, at that time in my life this is what I was meant to do, and now at this time in my life this is what I'm meant to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as a teacher, you've got the 24 kids in your class, and you impact them at a very deep level, and that's very fulfilling. And then when I became like a principal and went beyond, now I'm impacting 450 kids at a surfacey level. And I just realized it was different seasons. So now as a coach and a speaker, I'm impacting thousands, again, at sort of that surfacey level, but I have more impact. It's broader now, and I'm still teaching.
Right, exactly. Now the interesting thing is you moved from being a principal and then you moved into the religious sector. How did that transition all come about?
Yeah, well, I was, like I said, I became a principal, and then I became an administrator of a school. And while I was in, it was like a church school. So there was like a school and a church put together. And I was actually wounded by the leader of that church at that point, and I needed to get out. And it was the first time I was ever in bad graces with a boss, and I didn't believe it was my bad, because I would have just totally fessed up with that. But he had a health problem that was causing issues. Anyway, so I needed to get out, or I probably would have been let go, and I couldn't believe I was in that position. So I moved back to now where I am here in Eastern Washington, and because there was a job that came looking for me, and it was being a family pastor. So it was like they said, you've got this education background. We need people to work with the parents of our students here at the church, because the children and youth people are working with the kids, but nobody's working with the families to keep them together. And there's sort of an assault on the family these days. So would you come? And I said, for full time? And they said, yeah. And I went, I'm all over that. And so all that stress of being a principal, which is conflict about 90% of your day to be a principal. I mean, it's just a lot of conflict. it all just sort of rolled off when I moved back here to this area. And then I was able to really focus on producing content for the first time in my life for parents. Audios, videos, seminars, e-newsletters, all that stuff was just coming into being, and I just wanted to jump on the cutting edge of that.
Wow, that's epic. So it's interesting to me that you you were in an area and you realized that things were about to get bad. And that's what most people don't have the luxury, I'll say, of doing, or they don't, maybe not luxury is not the right word. It's more of they don't have the wherewithal. They don't have the, I know I didn't. Let's put it this way. I didn't have the wherewithal to realize how bad things were about to get before they got bad. I often talk about, whether you believe in God or the universe, regardless of, which God you believe in, I believe a higher power is there to help us. And I believe that at some points it will nudge you with a feather, and at some points he will, if you don't listen to the feather, will hit you over the head with a 2x4. And
Uh-huh.
while God's a loving God, and I think we all, agree that whatever our higher power is loves us, fact of the matter is that, he wants you to go in the right direction. So that 2x4 sometimes comes out. So I give you a lot of credit for realizing it before you had the 2x4 moment that you would get that, and then got out. And that really, I think, leads us to the turning point here of your journey, because at that point, that's when things started to change, at least from being in the school system to being a teacher in a different way, in a different modality, and to a different audience, right?
Yeah. So now I'm being a family pastor. I'm helping families succeed, parenting, giving them lots of parenting tips. I'm researching all this stuff. It's a lot of fun, to do this. Then my job expands to help marriages. So I start doing premarital education with couples and officiating weddings, and I'm loving that too. That is so much fun to be a part of people's life during that time. And my mantra on that is, people spend thousands of dollars on their wedding, which lasts 20 minutes, and they spend very little time preparing for their marriage, which ideally should last a lifetime. So
Yeah.
it was sort of a weird how our society has moved that around. But anyway, so yeah, so I'm cruising along with this, and I've been married. I've got two kids. They're 6 and 3 at the time, and all of a sudden, my wife comes home from she gets a job. She says, I don't want to be a stay-at-home mom, and she goes to get a job. I said, great. She comes back from her first business trip and says, I don't want to be married anymore. I don't share your faith. I never want to be married in the first place, and I want to date other men, and I'm done. And that just blew me out of the water. Just pulled the rug right out under me. I'm a family pastor. I'm officiating weddings. It's the biggest church in town, and now what? Blew me
Yeah.
away.
Yeah, I'm quite sure, I'm quite sure it did. And it's always so. I went through my own divorce, so I know from at least a small standpoint how shocking those words can be to you. From a standpoint of the fact that you were a family pastor and you were teaching families, adults and kids, and teaching them how to stay together, what was your, I'll say, gut reaction when you first heard that? Was there any self doubt there? Was there, what thoughts did you go through right at that point?
Well, it felt like, well, it was shock. Whenever you get bad news, you start with the shock thing and denial, like, this can't really be happening. And in fact, I even kept it a secret from the church for a month and a half, until my body was starting to go into like panic attacks, and I couldn't live authentically keeping that a secret. But I couldn't believe that the word separation and divorce were being associated with me. And so that was what was happening inside of me. I was just starting to fall apart. Like, I can't believe this is happening. It was humiliating. I felt shame, and yet there was no conversation for reconciliation. So I couldn't do anything about that either. So it felt sort of like trapped.
Yeah, and I guess the other question would be, I know you talked about not feeling like you weren't living authentically. Was there fear that if the church found out, and when the church and when the people who were taking advice from you found out, that they would not take advice from you anymore?
Well, initially I didn't think about that at all. It was more about what would be the consequences of would I get fired? Would I would my name get smeared around town? That was really the initial. It wasn't more about the rippling effect of my influence up to that point.
Yeah, and the reason I asked that specific question is I'm sure there are a lot of people watching our show today who have things in their past that don't line up with what they're doing today. Maybe they're a financial advisor that was bankrupt at some point. Maybe they're a teacher who dropped out of school and got their GED. Maybe they're a coach who never had a coach as a kid and really pushed all coaches away. And they're afraid of letting people know that they've had these challenges in the past because they're afraid people will look at them differently and they won't take their advice. So let me ask you this. Once people found out, did it attract more people to you now that they knew that you were going through something that they wanted to avoid, or maybe they were about to go through because maybe you didn't know they were about to get divorced, and they could relate more to you? Or did you find that it pushed people away, that they stopped or slowed down on taking your advice, or did it have any effect at all?
That's a great question. In the inner circle of the leadership of the church, they didn't know what to do with me. So they pushed away from me because I was sort of a problem to solve because they hadn't experienced a staff member going through a divorce before. So that was a little sad. But everybody else, I would say, rallied toward me. I probably had 75 people from my church clean my house, take me to coffee. They ran up my phone bill. They watched my children. They made meals for me. I mean, it was just like doing what other believers are supposed to do in those situations. They really came through. So that was cool. And a really neat outcome of this, and maybe I'm jumping ahead, but I now teach the divorce parenting class for the state for other parents who are going through divorce. And I tell them my story like I'm telling you, and I've got all their attention. I mean, they're like, whoa, he was a pastor and he got divorced. And then I've got them for 4 hours. I can tell them anything, and they're paying attention because they could feel this guy really went through that.
Yeah, and that becomes the key. So many times people, coaches and speakers, I know it was the same way for me when I first got on stage. I was afraid to show my vulnerability. I was afraid to talk about stuff that had happened to me in the past because I was afraid that it would make people look at me differently. And they'd push back and say, nah, I don't want to take advice from this guy who, doesn't seem to have it all together. And what people don't realize is, as you had said, people connect with you more and you can actually get the message out better if you're real, if you're true and authentic, and if in the right way you tell your story and you talk about your story. I mean, when I say right way, there's a famous talk I did kind of shortly after the divorce thing, and a couple people came up to me and said, "Wow, you sound really vindictive." And I went, "I didn't mean to." And it wasn't, what I was saying was really vindictive, but I got a little excited. So it's all about delivery, and it's all about using your past to help people in the future. So during your turning point, we're going to wrap up the turning point here in a second and move on to the aftermath. In this turning point, you've got the turmoil of the church leadership not standing behind you, and you've got the positive effect of the congregation standing behind you. What was the whole end result of that, and how did it affect, how did it start your journey? Because I think this is what started your journey into the aftermath. So what was the end result of all that, and how did it start your journey into the aftermath?
On the employment side, I was I was sort of like stripped of anything to do with family. Like I was on the radio, I was writing an article in the newspaper, I was the president of the National Association of Family Ministry, and I was told to get out of all of those things, and just heal. And there's probably some wisdom in that, to heal and don't tout yourself as the expert when you're in the middle of your darkest moment. So I got that, but I felt like I was being punished for everything. Like she left and I was taking the brunt of all of it. So I had to come to a sort of acceptance about that. So in that horrible, dark time, I really just dove into pursuing my personal healing. And I pursued 11 things. It ended up being 11. It wasn't a magic 11, but 11 things that I teach now of how to recover. Things like journaling. I thought, oh, guys don't journal. That's something girls do. But I really got into journaling my feelings to get it out, a place to protest. I got good counseling, to get me through this. Of somebody who didn't know me in town, really helped me through it. I got more male friendships. I got 3 hobbies that I never had. I didn't even know I liked golfing, hiking, and biking. Are now my 3 hobbies. But I wasn't living that out before while I was married. So I did 11 things, and I just focused that whole year on recovery. And I'm a goals guy, and my one goal was recover and get my kids through this dark time. So that was my transition time to launch out of that divorce.
Epic. So one last question before we go into the aftermath. Did you end up, I'll say, gracefully exiting or leaving that position, or was it a mutual decision, or did something else happen to get you to move on from the church into starting your own business?
Well, they were gracious with me and let me stay on in a different position, but I wasn't being tapped there in my 3 gifts: leadership, administration, and teaching. I was sort of in a back office, so to speak, but I was starting to coach small group leaders. Our church has small groups, and it's where people do Bible studies and they grow, and so I was starting to coach the leaders, which got me really excited about coaching. So there was a little seed of something there for the future, and I left very graciously. Another job opened up across town. My now wife, I was dating her then, and she said, "You got to come to my church because there's a position for an executive pastor," which is sort of like being a principal but at a church. It's budgets and buildings and staff. And so that worked out actually marvelously. Ended up making more money than I did at the last place. And all my gifts were then in play again, all my talents. And along that journey as well, some of the local therapists in town are my friends, and they said, "You should be a life coach." And I went, "What's that?" I had no idea what that was, heard about it, did some research on it, met a life coach in town. He gave me more of a scoop on it, and I went, this is exactly what I need to be doing. I naturally help people get to their goals and their dreams, whether they're friends or family or strangers, and so that planted a seed during that dark season to what I'm doing now.
Oh, that is epic. And that leads us right into the aftermath. Because when you moved on from the first church to the second church because your gifts weren't being, what I heard was you moved on partially because your gifts weren't being used. And yeah, the amazing part about that is you had to be aware enough of yourself to realize what your gifts were. And that's, the interesting part is that anybody who's going through a dark time right now, like I have, like Paul has, you have to understand and start looking for your gifts, because that's where your true happiness is going to come from, when you can use your gifts to their fullest extent, right, Paul?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm an assessment junkie, so I've taken Myers-Briggs and the DISC and the personalities and the Strength Finder, and so that was sort of a natural for me to just go deep inside introspectively, and I'm more of an introvert than an extrovert, be more self-reflective to really come up with a composite of who I really am at my best.
Oh, that's a great piece of advice for anybody watching this. When you're going through the turning point and just starting your aftermath, go through and figure out, what you're best at and what really makes you you. I mean, I know I've done Strengths Finders and Standout and Myers-Briggs and a number of them, and sometimes the results shock you. Other times they make perfect sense and it gives you the validation. So you've moved on, you're dating somebody, you moved into another church, into another position, and you're starting to become the success that you are today. Are you still, I know you have your own business, are you still doing anything? Like, are you still an executive, meaning with that church, are you still an executive pastor, an advisor, anything, or did you eventually move on from them?
I stayed with that church for 6.5 years. I just resigned last December because I had launched this business simultaneously. read those books talk about your day job and your dream job, right? So while I had a day job, I was developing my dream job. I was still trying to make a difference in both, but I knew I couldn't just up and quit. I had to make sure that it was actually a viable job that could keep going. So I resigned last year and launched this business full-time in January. I still do 8 hours of work for my new church that I'm at, but primarily I'm doing this full-time.
Epic. So you did what a smart person does, not a dumb person like me. But no, you do what a smart person does, which is you kept your day job while building your tomorrow, your future. A lot of people talk about today money and tomorrow money, and when you don't plan for today money by keeping a job or by getting a job, sometimes it makes things difficult. So you also sounds like you had an opportunity to hone and utilize and really come up with not only skills, but tips, tools, techniques, and other instruments that you use with clients today during that 6.5 period where you were, I'll even call beta testing. I'm sure you probably went through some things that worked, some things that didn't, and it helped you in building the successful business you have today, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I've been speaking for 20 years, ever since my first year of teaching. I really love speaking. That's a lot of fun to me, to give content out and make it real practical for people. I remember my first conference I went to, and they said, I went through the whole day, 2 days, and I didn't get anything out of the whole conference because everybody stayed philosophical. So I'm not a philosophical speaker. I'm super practical, like tools and tips that you can use today or tomorrow. So along that line, I was starting to develop, get more speaking gigs. Also, then I actually launched the business 2011 around Christmas. Another dark time had happened, another turning point happened, and people were calling me saying, "Do you do that coaching thing?" And I'm like, "I can." And so I had my first clients right around Christmas of 2011, and I realized I was getting paid and I didn't have a business license. And I'm like, uh-oh, I can't even cash this check to Growing Forward Services because I don't even have a real entity. So I had to get an LLC and a website and a tax ID number. And so that was the thing that just sort of pushed me into launching the business around Christmas of 11, was realizing I can't cash a check unless I've got a business.
Well, and I find it interesting. You were in a situation that a lot of people would love to be in, which is people were beating down your door for your services. However, what I believe from the outside happened is you had done great things for people in the past that they remembered. Whether you charged them for it or whether you didn't, whether it was part of the church or whether it wasn't, you had made a difference in their lives and you'd interacted with them in some point, and they thought of you when they had an issue that they needed coaching on or when they had some help. Is that a fair thing to say on why they came to you?
Chris, I've never actually thought about it. That was very insightful because that is true. These were people in the past that were linked to me through either the school or the church, or they knew of me from the community, and they were the ones that came calling. So, I never really thought about that, but that's true. There was some kind of link from the past that came to the present, and they became my first coaching clients.
Yeah, and it's interesting because that's what a lot of people miss. A lot of people have great ideas. A lot of people are great speakers. And they go, well, people should be beating down my door. I'm doing this right. I'm doing that right. I feel like I'm doing everything right. And if they haven't made a connection with somebody, whether it's through their content, their videos, their speeches, if they haven't made a connection with somebody, then people aren't going to come and become a client of yours or become, even talk to you about your services and what you do. However, if you have made that connection, if you have helped people, if you have made their life better, if you have made their life easier, then there's at least a better chance of them thinking of you than not thinking of you. Because Paul, I'm quite sure you've made the difference in thousands of people's lives, especially being a principal and being a teacher. And thousands of people haven't beaten down your door, but enough of them did that allowed you to start your business, right?
Yeah, and it's true. People still, my former students are now in their 20s, which makes me feel old, and they'll still say, "Mr. Casey, you're my principal," and so that's heartwarming, to run into those people. But to go back to an earlier question, like what have you changed maybe from that, is those initial clients were not my ideal client. I realized that many of them just wanted to talk. You know, they felt I was a friendly face and a good listener, and they didn't last for a long period of time. A lot of them didn't really want to grow. They wanted a little bit more like a counselor, um, someone just that would really empathize with them and listen. So I learned that wasn't my ideal client, but those were the ones that got me going into the business.
And that's epic. And the thing that I hear from that is that all along the way, you've utilized every experience to learn and grow yourself, which makes you an ideal person to help other people learn and grow themselves, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and because I think that's what a lot of people, myself included, have missed at times in our life is learning and growing. We look at what's going on and we focus so much about the struggle and the strife and everything else that we're going through that we don't think about and realize what we could learn from it going forward. And I think it's a really good place that we'll wrap up your hero's journey, folks. So far today, you've been watching Paul and learning about Paul's hero's journey. You've learned how somebody who was successful in the school system moved into the religious sector, was successful, had a very dark thing happen to him when his wife divorced him, and has come out of it on the other side because he's learned, he's always been a learner and a grower. And even though he's out, near Colorado, not that type of grower, he's a personal growth type of person. Um, And that's what makes him such an ideal person to work with you. So we want you all to stick around. We're going to take a 60-second break. And when we come back from the break, we're going to hear all about surefire ways to get your priorities done every day. Paul's going to teach you a little bit about it, and you're going to see why, exactly why Paul is the right guy to work with you and if you are looking to learn and grow. And remember, stick around till the very end. We've got a special offer for you. So hang with us. We'll be back in 60 seconds or less. Are you a coach, an author, or a speaker who wants your very own web TV show just like Expert Showcase, only with all your branding around it? Then what you want to do is head on over to VideoContent.Agency, go up to the Work With Us tab, send us your information. Let's start a conversation. Let's see if we can develop a program around you and your message. And until we see you there, make it an epic day. And we're back. Today we're talking with the epic Paul Casey. We've been hearing all about how somebody started off in the school system with parents as a teacher and really thought that teaching was going to be apparently in the school system was going to be the rest of his life. Moved into the religious sector, had a terrible dark time when he went through divorce and came out of it on the other side running a very successful business. And we've been hearing a lot about, and you've been learning a lot about how he's a constant learner and a grower, and why he is the right person to work with you if you want to learn and grow. If you're just tuning into us right now and you've missed the beginning of the show, go back, watch the beginning, listen to Paul's hero's journey, and then come back and join us and watch the second half of today, the expert focus segment of today's show. On the expert focus segment, we're going to talk about surefire ways to get your priorities done every day. Paul, this is a topic near and dear to many people's hearts because we waste a lot of time every day. Everybody does. And invariably, it seems like we never get all of our priorities done in a day. We let things, distract us at different points during the day. So before we get into the individual items we're going to talk about today, give us a brief overview of what you mean when you say surefire ways to get priorities done every day.
Yeah, well, I find that most of my coaching clients, if I drill down deep enough for every single one of them, at the root, there's a time management issue. Life is about managing your time and managing your energy, right? So that's really where it comes down to. They either don't know what their core values are and they're not living in accordance with that. They don't know the vision that they're trying to get to and what managing their time would look like to get to that vision. And so what I do is I help them identify those core values. I try to identify where they really want to go. And then there's a gap there between where they are now and where they want to go. So as a coach, I jump into that gap with them and try to help them brainstorm options. Because people who are stuck don't see options. They see black, white. I don't like either one of those. So I try to give them lots of options. I'm an idea guy. And until they can choose the one that they really want, to use to grow forward. And then they commit to that. I hold them accountable. I cheerlead them. And along the journey, we just come up with time management strategies that work just for them. So some of these are going to be like global that work for everybody. And then for each situation, like someone with ADD that chases squirrels, we may have to do something a little bit different.
And that's great. And personalization is always the best way to go, whether it's coaching, whether it's teaching, whether it's creating a speech for an event. So in this segment, we're going to talk about managing your time by your values and visions. We're going to talk about what to do every night, and we're talking about making appointments with yourself for every single task. So let's go ahead and dive right in. When you talk about managing your time by your values and visions, what are you talking about there, Paul?
Well, what we usually start out with, and people want to get to the really, really practical time management strategies, like how to use it at work, but I like to say, whoa, time out. We need to start at the core of you. Your values are your core, your DNA. They're the things that you need to be managing your life by. Stephen Covey, love that guy. Rest his soul. You know, he's not alive anymore, but he wrote a lot of books about time management. And so he talks about putting the big rocks into your schedule first. The big rocks are the values that you need to have in your life. Instead, we often push those to the side, and we do the tyranny of the urgent, the stuff that's right in front of us, or the easy stuff that we can just check off our schedule every day, because we get some endorphins when we cross stuff off, you know. So we cross off a bunch of little things, that makes us feel really good. But then at the end of the day, we go, oh, we didn't take care of the big stuff. Like my kids, I didn't throw the football around with them, you know, or I didn't give my wife any time today, or man, the stuff that's going to make me more money, I didn't do any of those things. And another day goes by. So I try to help clients connect with their values first, the things that mean the most to them. Because when they live life according to their values, they have more satisfaction in life. They get more done in life. They last at their positions longer. They're living in, well, they're not living in dissonance. Dissonance is that musical term like, and then, you know, just underneath it, everybody's like, oh, I can't stand that sound. That's how we live when we don't live in accordance with our values. We live just like a little bit off.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and it's interesting that you being a teacher, I'll say an ex-teacher, a recovering teacher, some of my friends would say, the technique that a lot of teachers use to teach kids how to make sure they get a decent grade on a test, which is answer all the easy questions first and then go to the hard questions, gets so ingrained in people that when they come out into the real world, into the business or the job world, and they use that same approach, what they don't realize is that and correct me if I'm wrong here, what they don't realize is that on a test you have a predefined number of questions, and you know that, okay, it's this time, this question's nobody's going to add more in, and there's not going to be like more and more and more, just keep getting added in. So a method like taking care of the easy stuff first and then moving to the hard stuff works very well on a very time-bound, limited thing where you've only got an hour to do something, and getting the most done, not the right things, but the most things done gets you more points. Versus in the real world where, you know, everybody's going to keep adding stuff to you every day. So that philosophy of always taking care of the easy stuff kind of weighs you down after a while. Am I getting it right there?
Yeah, and we overestimate what we can do in a day, but then we let all these other things come in. At least with the test, you know, you got the paper in front of you, you got the teacher with the timer holding it over you, and you know how many points are on that. But life is so much more messy.
Yeah, exactly. Now, when you say your values and your vision, every time we have a guest on that talks about values, I love to talk about this a little bit because there's values in my world. There's values, and then there's core values. There's values that you can kind of negotiate where if you have to play in a gray area, you're not afraid of going to hell for it, and you're not compromising something that's core to your being. Then there's core values that you don't compromise whatsoever. When it comes to what's your perspective on values?
Yeah, I'm really talking about those core values that you just mentioned. Those 3 to 5 that are just so you. They're boy, you couldn't be in a relationship if they didn't share those values with you. You couldn't be at a job if they didn't share those values, because after a while, you would realize we're going 180 degrees different from each other. I got to get out. I'm starting to gnash my teeth, or I'm going to the chiropractor, or I'm just always in conflict. I just can't handle that. Because when your values, your core values get poked, you really do get angry and irritated. So that's when you really know that you have a core value that's getting messed with, is when you just start getting really restless and irritated.
And how do those core values then align with your vision?
Well, so let's say you want to have, the vision might be that you want to have a great marriage, for instance. So we'll just use a personal example here. And so you say family is one of your top core values. Your vision is you want to have a very fulfilling marriage, a lot of intimacy and time together, and you want to be on the same page, you want to do stuff together. And so with time management, if you keep throwing your spouse to the back burner and you just keep working, and you keep popping open your laptop at night and keep working, and you keep answering your phone and you keep working, after a while you're definitely not going to get to that vision because you haven't carved out some undisturbed time, some focused time for your spouse. So that's sort of how it plays out.
Yeah, I've got a friend who he and his spouse schedule appointments together to make sure they have time. And
Yeah,
I admit, and he knows this, I chuckled when I first heard it because it's kind of a foreign concept. Because we were on the phone one day and he said, "Wait a minute, I've got to schedule time with my wife." And I went, "What?" And then you come to find out that they're both very busy, very successful, and they
yeah,
value their marriage. So what they've done is they've said, "Look, we're going to make sure that we schedule time to get together." And it's
yeah.
interesting you bring up marriage real quick because if you are in a marriage that's a core value, can you see where core values would change depending on the situation you're in? Like, in other words, if you get divorced and you're in a different period in your life, could you see a core value taking a back seat and maybe not being a core value at that point if you're single and having a different set of core values? Or do you think core values just stay constant regardless of the situation you're in?
Yeah, that's interesting because, well, the core value is family. It's not necessarily marriage. So I guess I didn't have to wrestle with that because when I went through the divorce, I poured my family energy into my children,
There you go.
and communicated with more extended family and developed more of a church family. And so family still always was still that core value. It never did shift.
Epic. And I think that's really key for a lot of people to understand is the fact that a big time core value probably won't shift. You'll just find a different place to put your energy in. Because would you agree, Paul, that those core values are something that should fill you up, boost you up, give you energy, help make your life better. But that if you adhere to those core values, they're what gives you energy and makes your life better.
Absolutely. And back to your last point of scheduling. So I'm a little OCD when it comes to time management. So I'm writing a book on it now, and that's the most requested talk that I have. So not everybody's going to be like me on this stuff, but I will block out date night, with my wife every Friday night, and so it's actually on the calendar. But just to play it a different way, let's say you want to be a great boss and you want to develop more of a culture of family with your employees. So then you would calendar, write thank you notes to employees, or write positive message to employees and actually stick it in your calendar. I mean, we'll get to this in a few minutes, but
Yeah.
that's how it plays out. Is the vision is I want my workplace to feel like a family. So how do I manage time? I got to block it out with some tasks that actually get me there.
Yeah, and like you said, we're going to talk about that probably about 5, 10 minutes. So people, you definitely want to stick around if you want to hear more about this blocking the tasks thing out. For now, I think that's a great segue to get into our next piece, which is what to do every night. And when I first read this, I loved the fact, because most people just go to bed every night and they're like, "I am done with the day. Just get me out and get me to sleep." But you have a little bit, I'll say, a little bit of a different take on that. Talk to us a little bit about what to do every night.
Yeah, so I've found, and I was doing it naturally without doing it on paper, but to look ahead at tomorrow and develop your 3 top priorities for tomorrow while you're still in today. So at work, that means I call it the 4:30 preview, or whatever time that's a half an hour before you leave work. And that's where you stop whatever you're doing and you open your calendar for tomorrow and you just sort of do a preview of what it looks like. And you put in then your top 3 things that if nothing else gets done, you're going to get these 3 things done. And you color code them in red or whatever you want to do with them, but these are the big 3 that you have to get done tomorrow. Then you leave work and you go home and you know you have peace in your heart knowing that I know what's on my plate when I get to work in the morning. Some people say, hey, I want to do this first thing in the morning at 5 a.m. Okay, you could, but there's just something about going to bed with peace to know what your top 3 are. And research shows your brain starts working on solving those 3 things while you're sleeping, which is pretty cool. So that's
Yeah,
how that plays out.
yeah, and it gives less of an opportunity for somebody to stick in a more apparent priority if you already
Yeah.
have your work set out for the next day, which aligns with the topic I talk about using a touchstone. I teach people to use a touchstone, and the fact of it's the 3 to 5 things they need to get done every day to push their business or their personal life forward. This is very similar because you're going in with a list saying I've got to get these 3 things done, and it gives you the permission to say no. At least in my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, please. It gives you the permission to say no to a less important thing because you can look at the person asking and say, look, I'm really sorry, but these are the 3 things I've got to get done today. I can either wait till tomorrow to help you because it sounds like it's important, or I can try and find somebody to help you. I may not be able to find somebody right away, but I can work on finding somebody that might be able to help you before the end of the day. I mean, do you use it in that sense as well?
Absolutely, and you might have to close your door at work if you have a door that you can close to get some of those top 3 things done and teach your staff, your team, that these are, when my door is closed, I need to be undisturbed. Now, you don't keep that door closed all day because people really are more important than tasks. And so I will, even those 3 are big, if there's someone who has an emergency or needs to talk to me, I will prioritize the person over the task. But then I'm going to get right back to those 3 things because they're sort of my drivers for the day.
Here you go. You probably already do this, but in case you don't, you want to make up a sign and give it out to the people that attend your talks. And it's formulaic. It's just something to the effect of here's the task I'm currently working on. If you really want me to get this done, and this applies to you, don't knock on my door. If you don't, but you know somebody who wants to get this done, don't knock on my door. P.S. If it's an emergency, knock on my door. I mean, I'm kind of saying it's a little bit of a joke, but the minute I thought about closed door, and I've never really liked the closed door philosophy only because, when things need to get done, you feel like you're interrupting somebody. I had a manager that I interrupted so much. She developed a closed door policy. Jan, if you're watching, hi, how you doing? It's okay. I realize how bad it was, but that's okay. But the point is, getting back to the important person, which is you, what do you think about using a sign or something like that so that instead of just closing the door, people can put on, look, I'm working on this task right now. In other words, boom, this is what I'm doing because it might be important to the person knocking on the door, and then they get the chance to choose, is what I'm doing more of an emergency than that person getting that task done for me.
Well, that's really interesting. It sort of puts the employee in a place of trying to say, is my need bigger than that need? And I don't know if we should put our employees in that position, but the way I handle that is I teach them in advance what the closed door means, because I'm also a huge believer in one-to-ones with my
Yeah.
employees regularly. So they know that they've got that hour with me fully eyeball to eyeball. I'm looking eye with them. They've got my full attention. So when they don't have that, they understand that I've got to get stuff done too for them or for the team or for other people. And by doing that balance, like spending a lot of time with your employees and focus time, it sort of alleviates all those people running to the door with that last minute, wait, I just need one signature, or I need your opinion on one thing. So that's sort of been the balance that's worked for me at work.
Yeah, and let's face it, when an employee knows he's heard, then he or she is heard. He or she is less likely to feel that need to get that signature or to do something. I know, I went through it, and then we'll get back to what to do every night, talking about that again. No, I went through it with my ex boss. She was so good at hearing me that I never knocked on her door when it was closed because
Right.
I didn't feel that need. Even if I felt the need to ask her a question, if I saw the door closed, it my need for being heard was satisfied previously, or I knew it was going to be satisfied in the very near future. So,
Right. You
that's,
could save it up then. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So, one thing I want to get back to real quick is when you talked about what to do every night, you talked about the fact that you will allow your brain to work on it. I talk a lot about this. I would love to hear more from your perspective and the research either you've done or you've read, and how you talk to your audiences about that, about what that really means and what goes on in your brain when you sleep.
Yeah, and I can't cite anything right off the top of my head. It's just more of a culmination of the research, but it's by anchoring stuff in your brain for tomorrow. Um, your brain, even though some of those might not even be a problem, but it's amazing. Like when you wake up the next morning, you're in the shower, which is where you get your best ideas, of course. It's in the shower. I'm already starting to think through. Okay, with that person, I'm going to take the discussion this way, and I don't even know where that came from. I'm just like, well, where did that happen? And I just know it's the result of your brain working on it by being planning in advance. It doesn't happen, and I just know it doesn't happen when at 6 o'clock in the morning I sit down to go, all right, how's my day going to look today? I've lost something by not having that extra 8 to 12 hours to think about it.
Yeah, well, and really, your subconscious is the most powerful
Yeah,
supercomputer on Earth. And when you're sleeping, your conscious mind doesn't have a chance to interfere with that conscious, doesn't have the
yeah.
chance to put all the fears, the blocks, and everything else in there. So it's free to think about and do. It's free to think about the problems and whatever you put in it. The whatever you put in it right before you go to bed. One last real quick question before we move on to making appointments. Do you ever get somebody complaining about, oh, if I think about something before I go to bed, I don't get to sleep at night? Do you ever have anybody complain about that?
Yeah, and I find more females than males because they're using both sides of their brain, and it's harder for gals to shut their brain off at night. I hit the pillow and I'm gone, so I just think that's a gift from God to, to be able to do that. But actually, I found more of my clients because they've done it at 4:30, especially with work stuff. They've had 5 or 6 hours at home that they're ready for bed. Their brain is not noodling on that for 6 hours. They actually can close their laptop at work and know, all right, I'm done for the day. I teach trying to have a hard stop in your day because having
Okay.
that hard stop and saying, I've done all I can do and the day is over. Some kind of mantra that you use helps you transition from work life into home life. And there are rituals you can do in order to do that. So you keep work at work and you keep home at home.
Epic. And I'm quite sure when people reach out to you and get in contact with you, you can show them some of those rituals and mantras and teach them your very successful techniques to get it done.
Sure.
Right, Paul?
Yeah, sure.
Epic. The one thing I want to say is now I finally get it, because when you say night, you really do mean 4:30 or sometime earlier in the day. When I
Yeah.
do it, I think of like right before I go to bed. So I think that's a great place to kind of wrap up. What do you do at night? And then move into making appointments for yourself for every single task. Now, this may come as a very foreign concept to people about making appointments for yourself for every single task. So let's give them a quick overview of what we're going to talk about here.
Yeah, so what I found is everybody needs to do a brain dump of all the things on their plate. This comes from the book Getting Things Done, an epic book from David Allen. And he says when you feel overwhelmed, you've just got to get it all out. So you need to have some place where you capture all of the stuff that you're thinking about. I got to take so-and-so to the doctor. I got to get the oil change. I got to make these 3 calls, these 3 sales calls at work. You just got to get it all out, and it's amazing what a relief it is to get it off your brain. So most people do that on a legal pad, right?
Yeah.
Some people do it electronically on their phone or some other type of productivity software. But then I look at that and I went, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. And I never was getting enough done because I just kept ignoring and procrastinating what was on the legal pad. So the system I use that is the only way that I am as productive as I am, and this is the number one thought that I can give, is to set appointments with yourself. So you actually take that task and you put it as a time block into your calendar. So at 9:30 in the morning, it's start up writing performance appraisal or whatever that is, and you budget a certain amount of time, and then when it comes to that time, you obey your calendar. And at 9:30, you stop whatever you're doing, stop checking email, and you start writing the performance appraisal. If you do this with all of your tasks, it looks like your whole day is completely top to bottom full, but actually a person can trump that. Someone that come with a problem could trump any of those tasks. But usually you're going to get a ton more done than if you just look at that legal pad and decide, I might do that one today.
Yeah, exactly. And I love how you say a person can trump it because we have to realize that all this time management is great and it's very effective. However, there are still people in our lives, and when the person who has something that happens to be truly more critical than something that's on a task, we still have to be human about it. However, having tasks on your list to me, once it kind of goes back to that touchstone concept of if the person coming to you with something comes to you with something and it's not that critical, at least you can say to them, look, I've got these 4 tasks I have to get done. I can get to it as soon as I get done with these tasks or if I have a break in between. However, these are, these are uber critical right now, or something, not to dismiss the person, just to let the person understand that you just can't work with them right then and there. I mean, is that how you handle it, or is there a different way you
Yeah.
handle it?
Yeah, and that's tying back to the values and vision to have some quick go-to statement. It sounds like you got one great one there. A go-to statement that just comes out of your mouth naturally when you're working on a high value or something that's going to get you to your vision. You don't want to blow them off. You still want to have that great customer service or employee service mentality, but you have to somehow communicate to them that, yes, I will get to that and you are super important to me, but this thing right here, I have to get done right now.
Now, when it comes to making tasks or appointments with yourself for tasks every day, how do you make those appointments? Meaning, I know we talked about big rocks before, and I'm a big Eat the Frog. I talk about it in one of my books as
Yep.
well. Brian Tracy's great. I have a
Yep.
little bit of a
Love
different
it.
opinion, but it's all the same kind of concept. When you set up these appointments with yourself, how is there a method that you use to be able to say what gets done at what time during the day?
Sure. So I encourage people to front load their big rocks into their schedule into the morning because the morning is well, they say the most creative time of the day is between 10 and 12 in the morning. So even if you're not a morning person, the research is still playing out. Between 10 and 12 is your amped up time that you need to put these big priorities in your schedule. So I tell people to front load it in their schedule because the cumulative stress of the day will overtake you like a tsunami. I like to say, I don't know where I got the quote, but it's afternoons are runaway trains. I love that quote because
Yeah.
if you keep dragging those priorities into the afternoon, then you get the customer complaint that shows up, or then you get a call from the school that says you got to pick up your kid because they're sick, and all of a sudden you have no more day, and you don't get those priorities done because it's insidious how those afternoons just sort of crowd out priorities. So if you can get them done in the front, that's great. So that's my first counsel on that. The second is to you look at the task, like write performance appraisal. You overestimate how much time that's going to take. So that's going to take me an hour. So I'm going to block out 90 minutes in my schedule for that at 10 o'clock. So 10 to 11:30, it's blocked out, write performance appraisal. I color code it. And what happens is I sort of play a game with myself to get it done faster. I'm gamifying it in a way because if I can get that done in an hour and 15 minutes, I just found time. Not really, but I've got 15 minutes that I already had budgeted for something else, and now I can use the restroom. I can go down the hallway and chat with a colleague. I can get some of my post-it notes, which I hate, that are laying all around, and I can deal with them and transfer them to my schedule. I can do those filler tasks because I've overestimated the time and I got it done sooner. So that's a couple of the little tips I give on calendaring.
Yeah, that's epic. And I would think also it helps to reduce the number of times you have to make the excuse for not getting something done. Meaning, I've been in a situation many times where, and I could never figure this out in the past. I'd always be in a situation where I'd be rushing to get to an event and somebody would call and I would always end up being late. And then I started looking at how I prioritized everything, and I realized that yes, I can always make the excuse that the phone call was what caused me to be late. But what it really was 3 tasks before that, I underestimated the time. So it took me 10 minutes longer to do something, which means I started my shower 10 minutes later, which means, and all of a sudden, then the person is calling me. Instead of the person calling me right as I was getting out of the shower, they're calling me right as I'm going in. So it takes me 10 minutes longer to get in. And it becomes this snowball effect. Now,
Yeah.
and I tell that story so that people can realize that it happens to everybody, But
Yep.
is that another good reason for overestimating the time, and to give
Sure.
yourself that peace and to reduce the number of times you have to make the excuse that something came up or something happened to make you late?
Yeah, a couple practical things on that is shift in your calendar, like if you're using Outlook, move it to the 15-minute increment and not just the half hour because you need travel time to get to your next thing.
Yeah.
And this starts making you think it's going to take me this much time to get to this next appointment. Or on the back end of a meeting, you need 15 minutes to just defrag from that meeting and send your assistant to go do something, or I've got to get something to somebody real quick. I got to fax this out. People schedule like meetings at 9, 10, and 11 o'clock on the hour, and they use the whole hour. Well, what's that going to happen? You know it's going to happen.
Yeah.
You're either going to be late to the next meeting, you're not going to be able to go to the bathroom. You're going to have to cut this meeting short. So I encourage people to schedule in these buffer times to just move from place to place, or I call it margin. You have to have white space or margin in your day to be able to handle those unexpected phone calls that come in or that urgent email that you just have to deal with right now. Without any buffer or margin, you're just going to not get it all done.
Yeah, exactly. And Paul, I think that's a great place to start winding down today's episode. Folks, I know after watching Paul, you realize that this guy's got his stuff together and that Paul's an epic guy and he knows how to help you learn and grow forward. And the fact that, he's mastered and conquered one of the toughest things in the world, which is time management. And it's somebody who can help you figure out and get those priorities done every day. Paul, before I give the folks the special offer we've got for them and your website, is there any last words you'd like to leave our audience with today?
It's a quote from Carl Sandburg. He says, "Time is the most valuable coin in your life. You and you alone will determine how that coin is spent. Be careful that you do not let other people spend it for you." So that's inspiring for me.
Epic. Folks, there's Paul's website, paulcasey.org. We want you to go over there right now. As soon as we're done, go over there right now. Okay, either right now or as soon as we're done, one or two, but you got to go over there. Visit paulcasey.org and sign up for Target Practice. That's Paul's tips newsletter and self and team leadership. When you do, you're going to get a free gift for opting in. That's the 11 tips to avoiding burnout. Boy, I think everybody can use that because I know everybody has been through some form of burnout in their life, even if it's just feeling overwhelmed, maybe not full-fledged burnout. But trust me, if you haven't been through burnout, you want the 11 tips to avoid it because it is a dark and nasty place that you don't want to get to. So, if you're just tuning in for the first time right now, check your watch next time. Please join us from the beginning. But the good news for you is you can watch us in the on-demand replay. Go back and watch Paul's entire hero's journey, find out how a person in the school system, a teacher who became an executive in the school system, then shifted into the religious sector and then through a dark time, ended up going through some changes, went through a divorce, and came out on the other side to help you learn and grow forward. Paul is a constant learner, somebody you need in your network, somebody you need to connect with, somebody you need to go over to paulcasey.org right now. You need to sign up for his newsletter. Take advantage of the special offer, 11 tips to avoiding burnout. And then when you're all done, if you haven't watched it, watch the episode. Watch it again, for goodness sakes. Get all the great tips and the golden nuggets that Paul has given you today. Get them, write them down, take them to note, take notes on them, take them into your heart because they are going to change your life. And until next time, make it an epic day.